Stay tuned for another edition of Consumer Protection and You. I am Ryan Lippe, consumer educator with the Ohio Attorney General's Office, and we'll be talking with an investigator from our Robocall enforcement unit to talk about unwanted calls. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Ryan Lippe, consumer educator with the Ohio Attorney General's Office, Consumer Protection Section, and I am pleased to have an investigator with our Robocall enforcement unit joining me today to talk about unwanted calls, robocalls, and what we can do to try to control the tide of those nuisances. John Hathaway, thank you so much for joining me today. Again, John is with the Ohio Attorney General's Office, and he is joining me now. Hi, John.
Good afternoon.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us. We are pleased to have you here. A lot of visitors and listeners and viewers are used to seeing me all the time, so it's great to get a fresh, friendly face in to talk about some of the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of what we do in the consumer protection section. Let's start out with a just basic question. What does the Robocall enforcement unit do within the consumer protection section, and how does that all fit together within our structure?
Well, thank you, Ryan. A lot of people are probably familiar with our bread and butter things that we do here at the office. We get a lot of complaints about home improvement, a lot of contractors who take deposits and don't do the work, people who do shoddy work. We also get a lot of complaints about automobiles. It could be a used car purchase or a repair that went wrong, and we get those kind of complaints. Obviously, we get the complaints about the online shopping and things like that. So we really have some bread and butter issues. But the problem of robocalls is something certainly that we're all dealing with. We're not seeing a whole lot of monetary loss. There is money lost, but it's really the annoyance factor. And so the unit was formed to try and address this. Now, this is not what we routinely do. The technology of a robocall is something that is kind of outside of our wheelhouse. And so we formed a unit with 2 investigators and 2 attorneys to take a look at both the law, which very often the best law to deal with or to use is the federal law, and to try and learn the technology. And since nobody else really in the country was doing this, we had to kind of start from scratch and learn from the ground up. Now, I come to the unit, I've been with the office for almost 30 years now. And so in the 1990s, I was doing telemarketing fraud. We had telemarketers who were operating right here in Ohio. They were in Cleveland, Columbus, it was local to us. So these things were easy for us. You just drive down the street and shut them down. You go to your local courthouse and the case, you just do the case there. The next thing we saw were a lot of prize operations running out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and Las Vegas, Nevada. Same kind of thing. Started partnering with the FBI, cracked down, and the problem quieted down. But the next thing we knew is that the telemarketers were now operating out of Canada. So we then formed a cross-border task force, started working with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And once again, over some time, we cracked down and everything seemed to quiet down for a while. Things changed, however, in the 1990s with the deregulation of the telephone industry. So now instead of just having a handful of your Ma Bells in the country, now it's deregulated and you've got a bunch of different carriers carrying the calls. But the other thing, the big kind of tidal wave change is when we stopped moving phone calls over the copper wire and we switched to VoIP calls over fiber optic. The call volume that can be handled is exponentially larger. And so the cost went down. And people of a certain age, people a little closer to my age, will remember a time when you used to receive a phone bill. And it would be an itemized phone bill saying what numbers you called and how long the call was. And your phone bill was based largely on that call volume. And so now you'll notice you don't get a long distance phone bill anymore. And that's because the cost of the calls has decreased so greatly that they just don't even bother anymore. Well, this created an avenue now for the telemarketers, the robocallers, to exploit this to their advantage. So now what we find is that using computers and cheap VoIP phone calls, they can use a computer to make the phone call to reach out to you. And you'll notice that a lot of these calls start with a recording. So that it's not even a real person who's dialing the phone number. It's not even a real person who's on the end of the line answering the call. They run this little recording to see if somebody even answers the phone call. And then if you press 1 or a real person answers, then they transfer the call to a live person. Like everything else, so many things have been offshored to cheaper labor. And that's what we also see with robocalls. So you'll notice a lot of the people who are answering the call on the other end may have an accent. And that's because they're offshoring these phone calls to phone rooms in other countries.
Well, I was just going to say, some of these robocallers are, I guess you could say, rogue telemarketers where they're not following the law. But a lot of these are scammers, just point blank scam artists. So do you see a sort of a combination of, I guess you could say, predators out there, phone predators, in terms of which ones are telemarketers and which ones are just absolute scammers?
Absolutely. And that's the funny thing about robocalls is, if you think about it, not all robocalls are bad. I've got kids who are not in high school anymore, but when that call came at 7 o'clock in the morning, it was to say that, due to last night's snow, the schools were closed. That was a call that we wanted to get. When your pharmacy calls you to say your prescription is ready for a pickup, that's a robocall. And so I don't mean to say that all robocalls are bad, but yes, the low cost has now created an easy, cheap avenue for these scammers to reach out and finally connect to you.
Well, and a lot of them are avoiding all kinds of laws. I mean, the one that they're avoiding that I guess frustrates a lot of consumers is the Do Not Call Registry, because when I go out and give presentations, a lot of consumers react, well, I'm on the Do Not Call Registry. Why am I still receiving calls? Or I'll mention the Do Not Call Registry and they'll laugh in my face. Right. And I'll say, well, you don't understand. It's working when it comes to legitimate telemarketers that violate the law. And where it's not working is with scammers for the most part, or it's telemarketers that are rogue and they get enforcement action by the Federal Trade Commission or by the state attorney generals. So, I think it's working to some extent. It just was never enacted. The Do Not Call law was never enacted to get rid of 100% of the scammers, because they're violating all kinds of laws out there. Is that right?
Many of us lock our doors at night to keep the bad guys out. But the bad guys often, if the bad guys went into your house, they're going to get around your lock. And it's kind of the same thing with the Do Not Call list. It's just one thing that we try and do to prevent the bad guys from getting to us. Some people respect the Do Not Call list and some people do not. And so, but for those skeptics, I can tell you that one of the things, as we learn how this stuff works, the carriers are now getting wise to the Do Not Call list, and they're starting to feel pressure from states like us and from the federal government to do their part to try and block these things. And so what we are seeing is some of these carriers implementing call analytics to look down at that list, the Do Not Call list, and see how many of the calls that they're carrying appear on that list. It's something that they can go to the people who are sending them the phone calls and say, hey, wait a minute, we noticed that an awful lot of the calls on this Do Not Call list are calls that are numbers that you're calling. Can you please explain that to us? Are you sending us bad traffic that's going to get us in trouble?
Yeah, and a lot of times on our caller ID these days, especially on our cell phone, it'll say scam likely or scam caller. And I try to ensure Ohioans that is the telephone company sort of catching up with the bad guys and at least alerting us. It may not eliminate the call completely, but it's alerting us, please don't pick up the phone. Please just don't answer. And I think that's one of our primary tips to Ohioans out there is a smart consumer tip when dealing with unwanted calls is, if you don't know the number, let it go to voicemail. Let it go to an answering machine if you have one. Check those messages as often as you want. But really, the last thing you want to do with a unwanted robocall is to give them the benefit of your answering the call. Is that right?
That's very true. As a part of what I do, I have some undercover lines that I answer. And I can tell you that the more I answer that phone call, the more it rings, or that phone line, the more it rings. And so, when you answer that call, when you tell the computer, hey, if I dial this phone number, a live person's going to answer. That's actually an asset now, a lead that they can sell. Here's a good number. Here's a number that a person will answer. And that's actually also a thing of value.
So what are some smart consumer tips? I mean, I think the primary one is don't answer the phone. But when you're dealing with unwanted calls, what are some other methods we can use to combat unwanted calls? What would you say to an average consumer that just wants to be left alone?
Well, again, the do not call list is a good start. It's one of the low-hanging fruits, or one of the low-hanging fruits that you can kind of swing at to stop the calls. Again, it doesn't stop all the calls. It's just another tool in the toolbox. I would highly recommend that what people do is, for those people who you expect to call you, enter those names and telephone numbers in your contacts. You'll notice that when people in your contacts call you, that name and number pops up. And so you now recognize the number as a call that you want to answer. The other thing is don't answer the call. The more that you answer, the more likely they are to call you, just for the mere fact that now they know they have a working number. Another thing that I would try and do is, when you go to that grocery store and they say, hey, would you like to give us your phone number? No, I'm sorry, I don't. When you're at the mall and there's that, little kiosk that says, fill out this form for, a free box of chocolates, or a chance to win a box of chocolates, it's even less sometimes. I would generally discourage you from doing that. I never seem to win these contests. And instead, what I'm doing is now giving a marketer my contact information to seed out, either for their own use or for the use of others. There's big money in a lead, especially that has demographic information. I'm this person, I'm this age, I live in this general area, I have more than one phone number, here's my email address. These are all things that people can sell as a lead to reach out to you. So I would also discourage people from seeding out that information to avoid it getting into as few hands as possible.
Now, I take from what you said earlier that these violators of Do Not Call, the scammers that are making robocalls, can make lots and lots of phone calls for pennies or parts of a penny per call because of internet-based dialers. And because of VoIP and because of the new technology out there that no longer is billing people at 40 cents per minute or anything close to that. Why you hinted that sometimes the caller ID looks like the call is coming from my area. Like, I'm in Columbus, Ohio. I get an awful lot of scam phone calls from 614. And I get an awful lot of scam phone calls with my prefix as well of my phone number. So it's 614 and then the first three digits. In simple terms, why is this happening, and what can be done to help find the originating caller? Because that's sort of what the robocall enforcement unit helps with, is gathering information to try to find out who the violator is.
What we call that is neighbor spoofing. And so they can make the number appear to come from your same area code. They can make the number appear to be something coming from the same area code and prefix. What we've also seen them do is use your own telephone number as your caller ID. All of these things make you think that the call is local and maybe I should answer it. If you get a call from Washington, the state of Washington, you may say, well, I don't think I know anybody in Washington. So I'm just going to let this roll over to voicemail and I'll figure out if I want to answer it later. But when you see that call come in that looks like it's local, you're more likely to answer it. And so we're finding that that's what they're doing, is they're spoofing it. Now, spoofing can be just putting up a number. They get to transmit the number that they're sending. So they can be just sending a number, any number that they've made up, which the shaken technologies are supposed to handle. That's a different topic. But they can either send that number, or unfortunately, they can also buy these phone numbers that they're sending. And I think that the notion is that by owning the number that they're sending, they're not spoofing the number. And technically, spoofing is illegal. But we have a situation where we looked at one company, and they were trying to buy these phone numbers to send out. And the company said, well, I know you want 1 million phone numbers, but I can only get you 250,000 at this time. And the company said, well, that's not going to help us, because if we only have 250,000 numbers, when we use those numbers to make phone calls, the caller ID, the programs that are looking for these spam calls will catch on to those numbers too quickly. We need 1 million to actually be able to trick people.
Wow.
And so it's possible to buy up to 1 million numbers that you'll now own, so that when you send these calls, it does appear to be local. So it's very difficult to know whether or not it's a legitimate call or not, which is why we just tell people, if you don't know the number, if it doesn't appear as coming from your contacts, just don't answer it. Let it roll to your contacts or to your voicemail. If they even leave a voicemail, which most of the time they don't, then you can decide if you want to call it back or what to do.
So it almost sounds like if it's our area code and our prefix, it may be even more likely than less likely to be a robocall. You would think, back in the 40s and 50s, it might have likely been somebody across the street or in the exchange. But are there other signs of an illegal robocall that consumers should take to heart and know? For instance, if the caller urges you to act quickly. That would be an example, I think, of a scam or tactic, because they don't want you to do research. They want you to just think on your feet, go with a gut instinct, and just give them the information or give them the money that they want. Are there other signs of an illegal robocall?
Absolutely. Do you mind if I touch on a few of the common scams right now?
No, that would be great.
Okay. So one of the calls I took a couple of weeks ago was on a grandparent scam. And the person called me, again, this is on an undercover line, pretended to be an elderly person. And my grandson called and said, "Grandpa, do you know who this is?" Because, of course, he doesn't know what my grandson's name is. I don't have one, but he doesn't know what my grandson's name is. So he waits for me to give him the name. So when I asked him, "Tommy, is this you?" He goes, "Yes, Grandpa, this is me." And so he was trying to, basically, he'd been in a car accident and needed bail money. But very quickly, he passed the call off to his public defender, because pretty quickly I'm going to realize this isn't my grandson. But like with so many of these calls, like you said, there's going to be a need to act quickly. And you'll often find that they're trying to get you to send the money in some orthodox way. In this case, I'm supposed to send him bail money in a padded envelope, in two envelopes, separate envelopes, in cash. Again, a lot of this to the common person is it's not going to pass the smell test. But again, by making these calls, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for the person who's not going to, who's going to miss it. They haven't heard this broadcast. They don't know the scams to watch out for. And so they just kind of play along until the hook is set and they run with it. So there's the grandparent scams that's been around for a while. Another big scam right now is the IRS Social Security imposter call. And so again, I got this call last week. The person has a heavy accent. He's an IRS agent. And my Social Security number has been found in a rented car on the border, the Texas border. There were drugs and money found in the car. And there's a problem because now that rented car is tied to my Social Security number. And he now wants me to give him all kinds of very personal information. And in the end, he wants me to give him his my banking information that he will now use to try and get money out of my bank account. Sometimes they want you to send money cards, same kind of thing. Sometimes what they'll ask is that you send the money out of your account to secure it, because the bad guys clearly have exploited all of your personal information, and they're going to take your money if you don't give it to the IRS or the DEA to secure it. But again, like all of these other things, there's going to be a need to act quickly. In the grandparent scam, because it was a criminal matter, it was a confidential matter. And so I wasn't supposed to tell my banker or the money or the company that I was using to ship the money what this was about. And basically, they know that these guys know what a scam looks like. If I tell these guys, hey, I need to send this bail, get this cash to my grandson for his bail, they may tip me off that it's a scam. So there will always be an essence of immediacy and confidentiality in getting this stuff done. Another one is the Amazon call. I got, I think that 2 of those calls just today. It's a pre-recorded message. My account is going to be charged $1,000 for the iPhone that I ordered. If this is not the case, please hit 1. And so again, the idea is that by hitting 1, now I'm getting to a live person because I'm already showing that I'm susceptible to this scam. And in this one, typically what they do is they're going to refund the money, but they need control of your computer to do it. So they're going to send you a link to access your computer. You're going to log into your account so they can put the money back. And then what they're frequently doing is sending you an image that isn't actually of your bank. While they take the money out of your account, they're actually showing you putting money back in. So it's, again, like you said, it's all about the immediacy and seeing who will fall for it.
Well, and what I'm learning is, the more you know, I mean, knowledge is power. The more you know, the more you can line up the what they're telling you and know right away, just from hearing this interview, from reading our publications at the Ohio Attorney General's office, the dots quickly come together and say scam, and you can hang up the phone and report it as a scam. Also, I know that a lot of times the scammers, as well as some telemarketers, will tell you to push a number to talk to a live operator, push another number to be on the do not call list. Is there harm in pushing that phone number to be on the do not call list? I mean, to an average observer, it might sound like a no-brainer. I want to be on the do not call list. But doing that to a telemarketer that's already violating the law, or doing that to a scammer, tells them another story, right?
That's absolutely correct. Again, just by answering the phone, you've shown them that they've got a good number. By pressing 1, it's just another confirmation that they've got a live person and that they can, by calling this number, get a live person. So again, what we generally encourage you to do is just don't answer the call. If you find that you're on a call with a live person, you've already, crossed over that hill, you can ask them to put you on the do not call list. It's not likely to make a difference, but we would generally encourage you first not to answer the call, and then second, just not to engage with them.
What can we tell consumers as we're wrapping up? What can we tell consumers about some of the systems and some of the apps out there that purport to help stop robocalls? I know some of them have even won technology contests at the Federal Trade Commission, and we don't endorse any of the programs or anything like that, but are there apps out there that you can add to your cell phone, sort of ammunition for you to be able to get fewer scam phone calls?
Thank you for the question. Yes, there are, and we would encourage you to work with your carrier, your cell phone carrier, your VoIP carrier, whoever. Like if you still have a landline, we would encourage you to work with them to see what solutions they have available. The one caution, and there are applications that you can use. Some of them will take the call before it's received to you to kind of look at the calls, analyze it by the calls that they've already received and have been flagged as robocalls. And some of them they'll send directly to voicemail. Some of them they'll mark as potential scam. The one caveat I'd put to that, however, is that in looking at some of these, at least one of them asks you to give them permission to access your contacts. And so you're also kind of giving up some information by using the service. Personally, as somebody who's very sensitive about my own information, it makes me uneasy that by maybe giving you my contact information, by maybe sharing my contact with you, Here, Ryan, here's my contact information. Here's my cell phone number. Here's my home number. Here's my email address. By you sharing your contact information, you've now given them my contact information. And so just make sure that if you use one of these services that you know what you're getting into. Read the fine print, read the reviews, and make sure that before you get into it, you know what you're getting yourself into and what you might be giving up.
Yeah, we've been talking with John Hathaway, an investigator with the Robocall Enforcement Unit of the Ohio Attorney General's Office. Both John and I share the responsibility of working in the Consumer Protection Section for Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost. And I did want to wrap up by making sure people understand where they can get more information. We've got a wonderful fact sheet on robocall basics. We've got other information online at www.ohioprotects.org. That's www.ohioprotects.org. And our toll-free number, the Help Center for the Ohio Attorney General's Office, not just the Consumer Protection Section, but actually the entire Attorney General's Office. It's a really helpful resource. It's 800-282-0515. That's 800-282-0515. And then if you want more information about the entire Attorney General's Office, all 30-some sections that we deal with on a statewide basis here at the Attorney General's Office, it's www.ohioattorneygeneral.gov. That's ohioattorneygeneral.gov. John, any parting words for our consumers out there that want to protect themselves from the nuisance robocalls?
You mentioned ohioprotects.org. That website will take you to a place where you can report your robocalls. We use that as valuable information to know what kind of calls are coming in and where they're coming in from. So I would encourage people to let us know about the robocalls. It can be very valuable information, and we share that information with the Federal Trade Commission so they can be shared nationally.
Great. And some of those calls, once they get into the hands of the phone companies and U.S. Telecom, the trade association, sometimes they're able to actually do some back tracing and find out who the originating caller is. So don't give up hope. Report the phone calls you get if you do happen to answer them. John Hathaway from the Robocall Enforcement Unit, thank you so much for your time and efforts on behalf of Ohioans. And I thank everyone for watching another edition of Consumer Protection and You with Ryan Lippe. I am a consumer educator with Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost's Consumer Protection Section. On behalf of John and myself, I wish you a good day and stay safe. Thanks so much, everybody.